Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of Oliphant's Motorcycle Club. I'm your host, Matthew.
I'm Drew.
And this week, we're going to be covering, I was about to say episodes 3 and 4, LOL, chapters 3 and 4 of Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And normally, we like to start around with some just general conversation, some beating around the bush, if I may.
Yeah.
But
we got our fair share of shooting the shit last week.
yeah, we had such a good time with our guest, Melody, that we actually ran out of...
Yeah.
We were intending to have her on and talk about both chapters 3 and 4.
In the same episode, but
And
yeah.
it just ran long. We talked about fast food and the ethics of hunting.
Something for everybody.
We went a lot of different ways. And I'm just now realizing that although we talked about Waffle House early on, we failed to mention it in the chain section.
Oh, yeah. I had it written down, I think. There's so much more to talk about.
Hey, every scar is a story. That's what I say.
We should say that even though you, listener, might be listening to this and last week's episode a week apart, this is only a matter of minutes for us in the studio.
That's what we call movie magic.
Yeah, the magic of editing.
Yeah. It's crazy. We're almost like God in a way. We control time and space. More so time. But just say that to say, we're going to get right into it. Should we recap the listeners with like the broad strokes of what's happened so far?
Yeah, that's probably good. I mean, there's not much that's happened so far. It's really just like we learned a lot about the setting. And then Bilbo left and gave the ring to Frodo.
We met a lot of the hobbits and Gandalf, basically.
Yeah.
Bilbo is departing from the Shire. Yeah. Frodo inherits the ring, learns about its importance in the universe of the story.
Yeah. Sackville Baggins is sucking. Always.
Hey, don't give me... We'll get into it. And... we basically, Frodo and Gandalf and Samwise collectively agree to set about this journey, whatever it may be, whenever it may start. And that's where we're jumping in chapter 3, entitled 3 is Company. And Drew, Frodo still hasn't left the damn Shire.
Oh,
we're not even seconds or minutes after learning about the One Ring of Power and like the necessity of destroying it to like stop the forces of evil in this universe. Tolkien says it's been 2 to 3 weeks since they were like dropping eaves with Samwise, and now he wants to wait until fall. Like we're literally, I don't know if we're in the spring or the summer, but Frodo learns that he's in possession of like maybe the most powerful magical weapon.
The WMDs of Middle Earth.
And he's like, can we wait till my next birthday? I gotta tie up a bunch of loose ends before I leave.
Yeah, like it's so evident that like what we're used to as far as like storytelling pacing goes, like is just like such a product of our time period compared to like Tolkien was writing this before there were sort of like standards set about like this is about how this type of story should be paced. Because it's just like there's just like no sense of urgency in this at all.
But basically Frodo's plan, it does make sense, is that it will cause quite a stir in a way that will like, we know good and well, being familiar with the story, that by about Act 2, do you think Frodo really gives a damn about like the petty politics of the Shire? Like so much of his concern is like, well, I need to sell my house and like have a good alibi for why I'm going to be leaving for a long time. We're about to discuss kind of like the reasoning and what he does, but basically he just is asking Gandalf, is it appropriate more or less to wait some time? And Gandalf is like, yeah, basically that's fine. I've got some errands to attend to. He needs to seek some news. And so he says, like, look for me by about the time your birthday rolls around, which is in, September?
Yeah, September 22nd, I think.
It's in autumn. So it'll be basically a full summer before Gandalf plans on being back.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, just talking about how slow it's. There's a really funny irony in the first, like, 2 sentences of the chapter, because it's, you ought to go quick. Oh, wait. Never mind. I misread that incorrectly. I misread it correctly. I thought it said you ought to go quickly. Oh, but it does say, and you ought to go soon. So they do mention, like, you should leave sooner rather than later.
But Gandalf still his MO is like, with the benefit of having read this, I think I understand the pacing a little bit more.
Yeah.
Gandalf himself is still not quite sure how advanced the timeline needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
He's seeking out some information.
I mean, it definitely goes to show, like, how little information they're working with right now.
Yeah. And his bigger thing is, do not talk about this with anyone.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, I think he trusts Frodo but doesn't trust Sam.
Yeah.
Because he threatens to turn Samwise Gamgee into a toad if he talks about it at all.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I know that's such a small detail, but I literally wrote down, like, hold up, is Gandalf just being, like, funny, or does he actually have the power of transmutation?
I was just about to say that. Yeah, like, we never see Gandalf turn anybody into anything. But it's like, it doesn't seem weird that he'd be able to.
Right.
I believe it.
Yeah. And he is a serious enough character in general that I feel like if he says that he could theoretically do that he's, like, less than joking.
Yeah.
So maybe he can only do it temporarily, but I still think he can do it. In which case, there's so many things that they could do differently to get rid of the Ring of Power.
Yeah, turn the ring into something other than a ring.
Yeah.
Like, make it something you can't put on, first of all.
Yeah. We could talk for hours about this, but let's keep the plot rolling.
Make it turn into a helium balloon.
Yes.
And then just send it into space.
Turn it into an eagle and then fly that eagle into Mount Doom. Hey, that's for the real heads out there familiar with the movies or the books and the controversial takes on the Fellowship's journey. But before Gandalf leaves, he does kind of stop playing coy, and because they keep going in circles, because Frodo's like, oh, I still wonder, like, wherever will we wind up going? What direction will I possibly set out on this quest? And Gandalf is just not helping him.
Yeah.
But he eventually says, like, now that I'm thinking about it, why don't you go to Rivendell, House of Elrond, half elven, good lord, half elven. And my southern is creeping in on these elf pronunciations. I'm not a Kenya pronunciation expert. But so Frodo at least now has an objective, right?
Yeah.
He says, good, I'll set out to the east. I'll make for the home of like the home of all these elves in this particular valley, which is not close, but it's nearby enough that it's feasible. And that takes us to Gandalf departing, and now Frodo has to set about actually leaving the Shire and making those preparations.
Yeah.
So the first thing that he decides to do, hey, this housing bubble that we're in right now, Frodo sees the real estate prices. He's getting approached left and right by Verbo, Airbnb. He sells bag end. He takes the money and runs.
I was surprised about that.
Me too.
He doesn't do that in the movie.
I don't think so.
It's definitely not made a point of that he did it if he does.
Yeah. I think the way it's framed in the movies is like he's only been gone months, and so people have basically left it alone. But by the time he rolls back into town, they're like, he's probably dead. We'll take his stuff. But it's like, no, he sells almost all of his stuff.
Yeah.
To who else, Drew?
The Sackville Mother Effin'
Bagginses.
And
you better bet your sweet Bippy that
at
Lobelia
a bargain price.
You bet your sweet ass Lobelia Sackville Baggins is
Lobelia.
She is wringing her hands together to get a hold of Bilbo's like silverware and like fire pokers and assorted home goods.
Lobelia seems like the name of like a small town in like southwest Georgia.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's right next to Little Vissy. Little witchy for my southern Georgians. But yeah, he straight up just with the help of Pippin or Mary, I think it's Mary.
Mhm.
He puts on this act of like, oh yeah, like Bilbo's money's running out. Like I gotta liquidate my assets just to keep my head above water.
Yeah,
here.
and he claims to be moving to Buckland.
Yeah, specifically to I'm assuming this is like the very most specific locale. It's called Crick Hollow.
Oh yeah.
This is a good time to talk about. Tolkien does this over and over and over again, and I appreciate it.
He just assumes you committed that memory to map or
map
to memory.
Like he'll use in the way that we might talk about like Denmark and the Netherlands somewhat interchangeably. He'll talk about the region, the sub-region, the city, and like the neighborhoods, like almost not interchangeably, but like he'll change the scope that he's referring to it at, like seemingly at will, which makes it very difficult to keep up with at this point in the story where the hobbits are actually going.
The maps should come on a like perforated page that you can tear out and just have next to you every time you're reading.
Matter of fact, maybe we should just like have like a printed out couple of reference maps.
Yeah, that'd be good.
It would certainly help me keep up with where the hell we're at.
Yeah. Where is Buckland?
I'm looking. I see Hobbiton.
I'm looking at the map right now. Hobbiton, right in the middle, basically.
I'm sure that everyone is.
And we know they're headed vaguely east. There's a Brandywine. Oh, Buckland is like directly east of the middle.
Oh yeah,
it's hard to tell what's written there.
Yeah, this is just the Shire.
Hollow.
Yeah.
Okay, we're making excellent radio right now.
Oh, absolutely. But for the reader, I think what is helpful to understand is that this looks like it's probably like somewhere between 25 and 50 miles.
Yeah.
Like it is a multiple day walk there, just walking. Just to kind of give an idea of this scale, we are still exclusively in the Shire, which is like the realm of the hobbits, which is one region of a very large world.
Yeah, they make it seem like it's essentially like a county or so.
Yeah.
And it's like pretty much everything we're going to talk about today is just them walking.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like they're walking from like Madison County to Athens, essentially. Yeah. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little more. Yeah. But it's like the distances that we're working with right now.
Which is like it's a long way if you're walking.
Yeah. But as the car flies, it's not
the farmer maggot drives.
Far. So but relevant to the story, it's far enough away from the Shire that Frodo can say, I'm moving here, and he won't be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
People won't go looking for him, probably, because it's such a long ways.
Yeah.
And so he'll have some, like, plausible deniability and cover for being gone for a very long time, such that he won't break any relationships with his fellow hobbits by leaving for an extended period.
Yeah. Oh, I wrote here on page 67, they refer to the Sackville Bagginses as just the SBs.
I like that. Sons
I wrote
of bitches.
SB more like SOB.
You're telling me. Sons of Bagginses. Sackville bitches. The dear listener, the combinations are nearly endless. Good Lord. So he pretends he's going broke. He buys this place over in Buckland.
Yeah.
With the help of Mary.
Yeah. So Mary's like a big deal in Buckland.
It sounds like
his name's Brandy Buck.
Yeah, maybe his family just originated there.
It seems like, but I think he's like, it seems like of the four main hobbits in this, Frodo, Pippin, and Mary are all like of higher social stature than Sam.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's
Sam,
like, I think that like Brandy Bucks are like kind of hot shit in Buckland, and
well,
then like the
if
Tooks are.
if memory serves, the Tooks and the Brandy Bucks are like fairly well to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I seem to recall the Brandy Bucks being, oh no, the Tooks are like the most rich.
Yeah.
But the Brandy Bucks, I'm thinking it's just like he has family over there, like he knows a lot about it. Like
Yeah.
Pippin repeatedly, as they're walking, refers to like knowing that territory better than
Yeah.
Frodo.
Oh, also talking about that though, Sam is so like submissive.
I wrote
In
the exact
this.
same thing. He's crazy subservient.
Yeah.
He gets bossed around all the time.
Yeah, like I underlined just like so that I would remember to talk about this on page 71. It says, Sam jumped up looking rather bleary. No, sir, I haven't, sir, he said. And he's talking to Pippin.
Yeah.
Pippin, of all people.
Sam, be free of your chains. Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit plot-wise. But it's a good point. There's some weird inter-hobbit dynamics that will keep seeing.
There's also
I
two
think.
more hobbits than we're normally working with.
I know, and we are about to get to it because you remember from last week, I'm a Bulger and Boffin head.
Truthers.
Yeah. So, basically, it's been a few months since Gandalf left. Frodo's birthday finally rolls around, his 50th, which is interesting. We're a full, 13 or so years post Bilbo's disappearance after his party.
Yeah.
It's more like 20 something.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Regardless, Bilbo has been gone for decades.
Yeah.
And it's been decades since Frodo learned about the ring, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But Gandalf leaves. It rolls around. The time has finally come.
Yeah.
Frodo has finished liquidating his assets, and he, Sam, and Pippin set off not on the ultimate journey, which is a big departure from the movies. They are just setting off to walk to Bilbo. Or I'm gonna keep doing that. They keep setting off to Frodo's new house in Brandybuck.
Yeah.
They're going to meet up with Mary, and I think maybe...
So, I've been so confused about this journey, honestly. So they like...
I had to reread a couple of pages several times just to make sure I understood. They are walking...
I know they're headed... I understand vaguely the trajectory of the entire story, so I'm not that concerned with the...
Right.
With the specifics of certain, like, detours, but...
So they packed up the very last of the stuff at Frodo's house at Bag End. Frodo, Sam, and Pippin are going by foot to the new place where they are supposed to meet Mary, and I think at first they're originally supposed to also meet his other friends.
Yeah. It's weird that it's just Pippin and Sam and Frodo for the first part. Like, you don't see just the three of them most of the time.
Right. If memory serves, Mary says something like bizarre, like to the effect of like, you'll need a proper housewarming when you arrive. So his plan, like, I think maybe he's busy, but he plans to be there.
Yeah.
Because
it's also, they're not planning to go on the expedition with him.
No, exactly. As we'll see later on, Sam and Pippin will eventually commit to like, or especially
you mean Mary and Pippin? Like, Sam is going.
Sam is going. I think Pippin, in Frodo's mind, has committed himself.
Yeah.
Because of some advice that he gets that we'll talk about.
But also, none of them are able to comprehend, like, the full scope of what the adventure is going to be.
Yeah.
Like,
this is... We are still at the very extreme
they think,
beginning.
like, oh, we're gonna go to Rivendell. That's the craziest thing that will come from this.
So Frodo, Sam, and Pippin set off from Bag End just to walk through the woods to get to Frodo's new place, from which Frodo he's worried because he hasn't seen Gandalf, and Gandalf promised to be back by about Frodo's birthday.
Yeah.
So he says, well, hopefully I'll run into Gandalf at some point between leaving and when I get to my place in Buckland. If I don't meet him, he at least told me to go east to Rivendell, so I can at least do that.
Yeah.
But he's like, at this point, he's just kind of hoping that at that point he'll either have run into Gandalf or have received some additional instructions for what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still very much like up in the air at this point.
Yeah.
But right before they leave, Frodo does
fox.
True, we're not even there yet. But although I did make a note of that. Before, literally like seconds before they depart, Frodo is around the corner from Bag End and hears someone, a strange voice, talking to the Gaffer, who you may remember from a few episodes back.
Yeah. Love that guy.
Someone is asking about his whereabouts, in which he finds... He thinks it's just another hobbit just prying because, hey, this damn Lobelia, Lobelia, you've been on my mind. So he's like, he doesn't think much of it, but someone is looking for him, which will become important.
Yeah.
They actually depart at night.
And Frodo hears that.
Yeah.
Also, it's like,
they start
not
like
something we get from the narrator.
Yeah, we start a Nightcrawlers-esque hike over to Buckland.
And there's a fox.
Yes, they you are so excited.
This was so crazy.
I know. But like you are jumping from they started to there's a fox and the fox
It's my next note.
They don't meet the fox until they go to sleep that night. So they walk.
They don't even meet the fox is the thing. We're just put into this fox's mind.
Okay, so we might as well get to it. They walk as far as they can get with like Pippin and Sam grumbling about being tired. They bed down and go to sleep. And then the narrator, third person omniscient, says that a fox with human level cognition stops and looks at them and comments how crazy it is to see hobbits sleeping outside in its own mind. Yeah. It doesn't say it out loud, so it's presumably still a fox that would look like a fox we're used to.
We're presented with the assumption that it's just a regular fox.
Yeah. But how strange.
But it's implied that all foxes, all animals seem to have like a high level of understanding.
Yeah.
And like they're at least articulate in their thoughts.
Yeah.
It says, hobbits. Well, what next? I have heard of strange doings in this land, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping out of doors under a tree.
Like, the foxes think to themselves in, like, biblical-esque language, which is just insane. I understand.
Who begat these hobbits?
Yeah. Let's just take a quick sidebar to say, I totally understand people not enjoying reading this. I have found it delightful so far.
Yeah, it's like... It's so just nice to be like presented with like this like world that's like it's so unique because it is so like it wasn't playing off of any like established traditions
right
for like storytelling, and so it's just like it does weird things like that it makes me really happy when they have like I hope we get more like talking fox content.
Look, going back to our discussion in the very first episode about how controversial of a book this was, there were so many things that I think either then or now an editor would like tear to shreds. Because like when else thus far has an animal just like thought to itself in the book? We've encountered so many other animals, and then all of a sudden he's just introducing this weird wrinkle that seemingly is a dead end. It's like it can come off as like half-baked, but I really don't think it is. I think it's just like...
Yeah, it feels very like a real person is writing this, and it's like you're sort of just like seeing what it's like when a person is left to their own devices with a particular thing.
Yeah. And so it can be inconsistent and long-winded at times, but the overall effect is, well, he's incredible at writing. He's detailed almost to a fault in his natural descriptions and like descriptions of like distances and relations, and like he's just comprehensive. And so it can become a slog.
Yeah. But
we're starting to get into some decent plot, and so it's melting away very quickly, I think. So we meet this fox that can think like a human. The next
or
morning,
a hobbit.
Or a hobbit. The next morning they wake up. Pippin, like you had started to mention, Sam basically like bending to the will of Pippin.
Yeah.
Pippin is just very bossy and like he's kind of a
Yeah.
queen. He is insistent that they have breakfast, that Sam fetched like water to heat up,
Yeah.
and he's like a little bit pissed that Sam hasn't already done this.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
but yeah, like Sam also, and maybe this is something we could talk about. Sam also repeatedly refers to Frodo as his master.
Yeah.
I don't think it's meant to evoke like a slave master connotation.
But it's
It
just
seems
like-
more like just the nomenclature of the world.
Yeah.
But like
the servant to master relationship seems to demand a lot.
yeah, it's a very like feudal relationship, I
Yeah.
would say, almost like lords and like peasants who work a land and like are committed at some level to
Mhm.
this person. I mean, problematic as a social relationship that exists historically and at present
Yeah.
with humans, but like only very like superficially problematic in the context of the book.
Yeah.
Like it's not a matter of like Sam needs to free himself from his chains, because like the in and out of the relationship is just a friendship. He
Yeah.
just sees him. He just wants to be helped. Like I realize
Yeah.
even as I'm saying it that this sounds like a parasocial or
Yeah.
like problematic relationship, but like it doesn't feel that bad in the context of the story. Anyway,
I wrote down, or I circled on page 75 that they wait, who is it that asked him this? I think it might be Pippin asks Frodo if they want to stop for a bite and a sup.
these dang hobbits want multiple meals even in one
I
meal.
just thought that was a funny way to say that too.
Very, very English. Well,
A sup.
they're hiking and stopping, and there's all kinds of descriptions. This we talked about it off mic. This hike just sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it seems like they're having like a good day.
I want more stories with
They
people
are
just walking.
Is it in the next chapter where they start to really encounter the Black Riders?
Well, this is the very next thing.
Okay, yeah.
Later on in the day, they're going around some bends, and they start to hear hoofsteps approaching. And they kind of discuss it amongst themselves. They're like, should it really matter if we're on the road or not? But they think they should probably get off and just see
Yeah.
who it is.
Yeah.
So they kind of hide behind some foliage or maybe trees. And then they see this rider approaching, a big person, as they call them.
Yeah,
Essentially just
I like that.
humans are human-sized entities. They refer to as big people.
Yeah.
They see a big person in full black, fully cloaked.
Yeah.
Um,
Black Horse too. They're
yeah.
referring to him as the Black Rider.
Now, do we think KT Tunstall wrote that song about ring wraiths? Big black horse in a cherry tree? They could have been hiding behind a cherry tree for all we know.
I was surprised. Okay, so I think we should first acknowledge, like, I think we're both obviously having seen the movies. We're just assuming that this is still just the ring wraiths.
But it could be someone else.
It could be.
And I think
And it seems-
intentionally
It seems, yeah, it seems much more human-like than a ring wraith.
Yes.
But it would make sense that they met a ring wraith prior to meeting somebody that could take on a ring wraith
Right.
as well.
But they're very unsure. It just stops. It seems it's mere presence.
I didn't know ring wraiths could like talk.
Yeah,
if it
apparently.
is.
I think maybe there's just some artistic license taken with like their
Yeah.
spookiness in the movies.
Yeah, that's true.
But this is the first time we really see, and why I'm led to believe this is definitely a ring wraith,
Mhm.
is that the ring starts calling out to Frodo.
Mhm.
He feels almost like primally drawn to put the ring on.
Yeah.
And we know, with the benefit of having seen the movies, like to reveal his position to Sauron.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know that yet. It's
Yeah.
just this strong urge that he feels.
Well, hopefully that doesn't become a problem for
Yeah,
him.
I seriously doubt it will, but we'll see.
He'll acknowledge that it's an issue now and learn from it, and he'll be fine.
So they, like this thing kind of seems like it's looking for them, tracking them. The horse is sniffing, or it's sniffing after them.
Yeah.
But it eventually moves on, and like Pippin and Sam don't really know what to think. They just think it's like, man, that was peculiar, then kind of like scary. Like maybe we should be a little more quiet. But Frodo is like he is bugging.
He's like, oh shit.
Um,
They run into elves.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of singing. But
Well, Drew.
There's so much singing in these books.
There is a lot of singing. So they are singing a bunch of walking songs and being just loud as hell.
Yeah.
Considering that they are like just had a close encounter. And then they before they encounter the elves, they hear more footsteps.
Yeah.
And a second rider, and they duck out of the way. And this time there's less stuff for them to hide behind, and so it's like it's a close call.
Yeah.
It is off. It disembarks the horse and is looking for them. Yeah. And then they hear elven singing approaching, and whatever this rider is this time is scared off.
Yeah.
So who is it that we meet, these elves?
So they are high elves.
MF and high elves.
And Sam is lit.
Oh,
there's the sort of the leader is Gildor, right?
Gildor, yes.
Yeah. And this is not in the movies at all.
No, it's not. And I think specifically because there are so many incidents that occur before we, like, we are the equivalent of, like, no more than 20 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And we are approaching 80 pages of text.
Yeah. Yeah. And
there's so many different individuals that they come across. It's wild.
Yeah, it's honestly, it does have the feeling of, like, even though this was definitely not something he was, like, drawing off of, it feels sort of like the experience of walking, like, just through the countryside of Skyrim, and they're just like NPCs throughout that you meet, and it's like, here's a random band of elves that you've come across.
Yeah, and I think in that respect it's much more realistic, because like there's all these, like, almost in like a D&D or just like an RPG type way to make a connection to games. There's just all these random, like, side things that you might be beneficial or detrimental, and it's just kind of up to the characters to decide how they interact with it. Yeah. Which is much more, like, that's just how life is. You don't just single-mindedly try to do anything in life, really.
Yeah.
So the high elves pass through. They actually know who Frodo is.
They keep meeting. Yeah, they do, actually. Because they know who Bilbo is.
Right.
They keep meeting people that just, like, feed them throughout these chapters. Like, that's, people are so nice in these books.
I agree. Other than the, like, horrible, like, Melkor
people
created
are either
monsters,
evil or, like, the most generous and,
like the most nasty most characters in Lord of the Rings are that aren't explicitly written as evil is, like, they have misgivings of other people.
They're, like, rude to strangers.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm like, I want to live in this world where people will, like, give you the, like, elven bread off their back.
Yeah.
Frodo is very concerned about the Black Riders and wants to ask about them. But they're like, let's not talk about it here. Like, or at all.
Yeah. He's hoping the elves have some information about them, but they're like, well, yeah, we have suspicions, but, like, it's better not to freak you out by what we think it might be.
Yeah. Which is such a... That is
so
a very condescending way to talk to a hobbit. I would understand if hobbits had a complex over how they're treated by elves and other big people.
Yeah. At the very beginning of chapter 4, chapter 4 is called A Shortcut to Mushrooms. Frodo actually says he's talking to the other hobbits about, like, his discussion with Gildor the night before. And they were like, you should have talked to him about this. I'm sure it's super important. And Frodo says, in that case, I'm sure Gildor would have refused to explain it.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, Frodo coming with the sass.
Yeah.
I liked it.
But still in chapter 3, they, right after the Black Rider leaves, they say, like, let's not talk about it here. Follow us. We're walking in more or less the same direction as you. Accompany us to Woodhall, which just sounds like this kind of, like, not even like a bastion really, but just like a place that they know about that they can settle down for the night.
It's like like a campground.
Yeah, essentially. And they like eat, drink, and be merry, but not marry Brandybuck.
Nope.
And like you said, Sam is losing his ever-loving mind. He's like the Hobbit version of a weeb for elves. So
they sleep in they sleep in so many just like nooks and crannies on the ground,
like the roots of a tree, really.
Yeah.
But just like nice and flat and soft.
Yeah.
Frodo asks about Bilbo, and that, like you said, Gildor knows Frodo because he knows Bilbo.
Yeah.
He does, even though he's being very opaque about what the actual danger they've encountered is. He does at least, like, Frodo elucidates that the enemy, broadly speaking, is related to this entity. Yeah. And so Gildor actually invokes, like, the protection of Elbereth, which is... We should not get into, like, the mythology here, but needless to say, you can think of Elbereth as the equivalent of, like a classical god, like being over a specific domain, like essentially that level of power.
Like a part of a pantheistic religion.
Right. But in the context of the universe, this would be the equivalent. Yeah. This would be the equivalent of like just below a god, like a demigod essentially, like had a hand in constructing this world. Like, so this is a very powerful invocation for an elf to like bestow upon a hobbit, I think.
Yeah.
It's not talked about at that level, but it is quite striking. Like, the elves are probably one of the most suspicious of other races, at least in the movies. So it's like, it's nice to see them be so nice to a hobbit.
Yeah.
But one thing before we jump to chapter 4, Frodo jokes that the elves are like not good for getting counsel from because, quote, they will say both no and yes. These elves, they're a bunch of grill-pilled moderates. They're fence-sitters.
I was about to say they're the Democratic Party.
Yeah. My goodness. So yeah, as helpful, I mean, it is true. The elves were saying like, we're not going to tell you. Like, we don't know. It could be this or that. But ultimately, and before they settle down for the night, Gildor of the High Elves recommends speaking with Gandalf before they leave the Shire. And if they can't meet up with Gandalf, that Frodo absolutely needs to bring some trusted friends. So I think this is, earlier I mentioned Frodo in his mind is already like bringing his friends along. He knows Sam is coming with him, but he says, okay, if I can't link up with Gandalf, I still need to make this happen. I'm just going to need to bring people I trust.
Yeah.
So without even knowing it, I think Pippin and Merry are getting roped in.
Yeah. Which is crazy because it's like that's like they kind of, I think, join on their own in the movies.
Right. Yeah. It's like we just want to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
Which might still happen. We haven't gotten there yet, other than Sam.
True.
And that kind of was his reasoning.
Yeah.
But that takes us to chapter 4. So they bed down for the night. The next morning, chapter 4, a shortcut to mushroom starts. Yep. And hey, mushrooms. They're on a trip indeed. Am I right?
I was wondering what kind of mushrooms are they? Like, so at the end of the chapter, they get given these mushrooms, and it's like, are they just like truffles? Probably.
I'm picturing brown mushrooms from Minecraft, just like shiitake mushrooms, essentially.
Yeah.
Or I guess it's white, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean?
Maybe it's like chanterelles. That'd be good.
Hey, could be.
I definitely feel like there's some kind of gourmet mushroom.
It's either that or just like the cartoonish, just like red and white mushrooms that you always see, like just all kinds of crazy shapes. Yeah. That seems more like what a hobbit would be into, TVH.
Yeah.
Like they like hardy stuff, but they like lots like very striking looking produce. So who's to say? Tolkien doesn't do us a solid by intensely describing these mushrooms. Gosh. Picture whatever
this
mushrooms
dude never
you like.
Describes anything.
Preach. So, page 84. They wake up. There's no sign of elves, but they've left them some food.
Oh yeah.
Pippin. once again is being bossy as hell. Frodo is trying to talk with them about important things, and Pippin's like, no thinking at breakfast.
Yeah.
Which, TBH, let's just talk about it. The Hobbit's relationship with food is probably the healthiest I can think of just like genuine, just like love as like one of like, I think a Hobbit would say one of the reasons for being alive is to eat and drink. And I think that is true. Like it is such a pleasurable thing.
Yeah.
And they're seriously to the point of like, you are going to ruin your enjoyment of this lovely breakfast by mucking it up and thinking and talking.
Yeah.
Like just
They say, hey, don't talk to me till I've had my lambda spread.
yeah, seriously. But
I don't think they've even had that yet.
yeah, they have. That won't come till post Rivendell, I don't think.
Yeah.
No, Lady of the Forest, right?
Yeah.
Man, we got a ways to go. We are not even out of the Shire yet. So Sam is probing Frodo, asking, like you said, if Gildor told him anything about these Black Riders. And Frodo, damn it, God, golly. Frodo says like, no, they didn't really say anything. But Sam does like literally recommit himself of like, I don't mind the danger. Like it's been weird to see some elves. Like I'm in it to win it at this point.
Yeah. So we talked about how they're just like walking these entire 2 chapters.
Yeah.
They are drinking so much. It
Yes.
seems like
Yes.
and I was thinking like even when they're like riding in like the cart later, I think they're still drinking. And it's like before cars could like make you go that quick, like did people just like drink while they were like going from one place to another?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Like you stay
I mean,
loosey
it makes
goosey.
sense, but it's like I don't know. I guess like because you're not gonna get into like a big wreck if you're like on a horse.
Right.
The horse is gonna do most of the work, I think.
You'll be falling about the place.
Like make sure it's going in the right direction is all it does. But the horse has got some pretty good systems in place to make sure it doesn't crash
Yeah.
violently.
Plus, if you're walking, you can stumble all you want.
Yeah. I guess it would make you go slower, but like
True. But it'd be more
they're
fun.
obviously not in a hurry.
Yeah. Which, again, between all the singing and the drinking, it's like, you think these idiots wanted to get caught.
Yeah.
So they set out from Woodhall the next day. They decide, to their credit, despite their drinking and singing, they decide to change path to kind of be harder to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And they're gonna cut through brush to get to Buckleberry Ferry.
Yeah.
Pippin and Sam really are like, I don't know, we should stay on the road because then we could go to an inn called the Golden Perch. And Pippin's like, they got the best beer I've had.
Yeah.
And Frodo's like, are you kidding me? Like, we're gonna get caught if
we're
we
not
do
gonna
that.
we're not gonna take the long way so we can go to your brewery.
Yeah, because Pippin initially is like, shortcuts make long
make
journeys.
long delays.
Long delays, that's what it is. And he's literally just bullshitting to try and get drunk. Which, hey, props.
Yeah.
I admire it. So they eventually like reluctantly are like, fine, Frodo, we'll cut through all the brambles.
Yeah.
And it's immediately very difficult and they are making no progress.
Yeah.
But they descend the initial bank that they were standing at and talking. And when they get to the bottom, Sam spots with his eagle eyes another Black Rider, maybe one from earlier, at the top of the embankment, which eventually goes away. But Sam was like, whew, I'm sure glad I saw that. They keep making their way through the brush. Still, they're singing again. This is the third time they encounter a Black Rider pretty obviously looking for them. And
they just are still singing.
Yes. At least they're in the woods now.
Yeah, I think Tolkien just like writing verse.
Yeah, me too. Because it's not just saying they're singing. It's like 3 or 4 stanzas.
I tried to
Did you sing it to yourself?
No, I tried to listen to the audiobook for The Hobbit a few years ago, and I stopped because like there's just as many songs in The Hobbit, but like the narrator was just like, it wasn't like the Andy Serkis audiobook of it either. It was like this like old man narrator, and he would like sing it, but it would just be like this old man singing a cappella like a song I've never heard before for like 3 minutes.
We're walking down the road again, and whither we cross, no one knows. Like that's how all the songs go. They're verse, but they're not really like melodies necessarily. They're just like
the
couplets.
melody's not transparent, except for there is actually, I recognize it from the movie. The one that they sing in, I think it might be The Green Dragon, but Merry and Pippin sing it at one point where it's like, to heal my heart and drown my woe. Like, you know, it's on page 88 of the version of the book that we're reading. And I thought that was,
I didn't even notice.
Yeah. I just like, I read that line and I was like, oh yeah.
But just imagine Drew singing that after 3 brushes with death and meeting some like elves that knew where you were before you saw them. They lack tact. They'll gain it. They'll learn. Eventually, finally, after like what seems like hours in the story, they leave the brambles and are like, ah, man, we really overshot like the path that we were going for. But Pippin knows where they are more or less, and it's like, let's just keep going this way.
Yeah,
because he knows where the location of the fields of Farmer Maggot.
Yeah, which like Frodo's like uneasy going to Farmer Maggot because he has like a history with him. So Farmer Maggot is like very protective of his land because he lives on like the very edge of the Shire.
Yes, and
he has these like dogs that are like, he'll like sick on people pretty quickly.
If you've seen Stand By Me, it's a real topper sick balls situation or whatever the hell that is. I forget the name of the dog, but like picture that, but hobbits, a hobbit owning a farm and sicking it on kids. Frodo got caught stealing mushrooms repeatedly when he was a kid. Yeah. But Pippin ain't scared. He's like, this is a friend.
I think Pippin's like friends with him. Yeah. So.
But, and this is another crazy, it's not a huge digression from the movie, but in the movie, they literally just like run through this field and like, are being chased. Do not want to
meet this. Yeah. Oh yeah. Cause it's like right when they're leaving that they meet the Black Rider.
But Farmer Maggot comes up on them and actually is like super nice to them.
Yeah,
and
it's like he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah. Like more or less forgives Frodo his trespasses as a youth. And like invites them in for dinner and then to like take them by wagon to the ferry that they're ultimately trying to get to, which is like, that's awesome.
Yeah. He just seems like, and then his wife like gives them these like cooked mushrooms.
Yeah. Frodo has a mushroom plug, Mrs. Maggot. Which is like, it's so funny. It's like pretty explicitly meant to make the reader chuckle in the context of the story of like, oh, Frodo was so worried, but now he's getting a wink and a nod from Farmer Maggot and his wife of like, ain't that something?
Yeah, because like his dynamic with Farmer Maggot is basically like, oh, I remember when you did that bad thing, but it's okay because you were just a kid.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's like, of course they're like that because he was a kid when this happened, and now Frodo's like a 50-year-old man.
Yes, absolutely. But it's crazy the degree to which they whitewash Farmer Maggot's kindness in the movies. Justice for Farmer Maggot, I say.
For real.
He is, again, like many of the decent people in this book, just an exemplar of like looking out for one's neighbors and offering kindness. Like I think in kind of this like very subconscious way, like I am very attracted to the good people of Middle Earth in a way of like, oh, there just aren't humans like this in the like, real world that are like that thoughtful and helpful.
And it's like so specific to like Tolkien's brand of fantasy, because like think about like, I mean, Game of Thrones is kind of an extreme example, but like people are just like people are known for being horrible to each other in that world, and it's like,
you know what the difference is?
What?
This is a post-scarcity society. They got all the pipe weed they could smoke. They got all the ales. Like really and truly though, like there's very little, at least in the Shire, which is like
which is like crazy how it's like this land of plenty, but at the same time is like they're just like nobody has tried to like gain control of this like breadbasket of a region.
I honestly think in a way that is just not very realistic. Like most of the world, they have what they need because they work until they get it.
Yeah.
And like it sustains them. And so there's not really fights over resources. There's fights over magic weapons and like fights over good versus evil. I mean, it is very biblical.
Yeah,
at a
fights over
level.
these like one of a kind objects that like
so it's like
have this immense power.
Greed and hoarding still exist, but it's like it's not over like stocks of bread. It's over or money. It's very rarely over even like gems and jewels and so forth. It's like gems that like have a hand in like creating or destroying the universe or something crazy.
Exactly. Like it's one of the Silmarils that's found in the heart of a thing, and then the conflict isn't between two like nations. It's between a kingdom of dwarves and a dragon.
Yes. Just bonkers stuff. Like it at once is like the standards for what qualifies as like a meaningful like battle between people are so much higher. Like it has to be like a matter of life and death for the entire realm for it to really get to the point of like full scale war. Yeah. But then it's like all in. It is like no one is untouched by war when it happens. Yeah. But it happens compared to what humans are used to, like our listeners and us, like much more infrequently, it seems like. Yeah. It's just that you're more likely to get like randomly stabbed at any point by like a marauder or something. Well, we can have some closing thoughts. We're getting close to an hour, but let's go ahead. The very last thing that happens. Yeah. Farmer Maggot is approaching the ferry, and then they hear foot.
Oh yeah.
Like hoof prints. They don't hear the prints. They hear like clomps. We'll say. Yeah. Oh, who goes there? And who is it? Is Merry MF and Brandybuck.
Oh yeah.
He was waiting for Frodo at Frodo's new place, and he just never showed, and he was like worried, and he thought he might see him at the ferry. Yeah. So at this point, we got Frodo, we got Sam, both of whom are basically in it for the long haul. Yeah. Pippin, who's at least in it to get to the new house, and Merry, who's at least in it to get to the new house.
That's like half of the freaking fellowship.
I know. But we are still not even to like their quest being really like realized, which we'll get to. So yeah.
And so now they're basically knowing them, they're probably gonna stop at Frodo's house next, right?
Probably for the story. Okay, so
but eventually they're kind of headed in the direction of Rivendell.
Well, thinking about
they're gonna go to Bree at some point.
I think thinking about how the movie is set up and how they immediately get off the ferry and enter Bree, I do think that like the next step is for them to like either go to the house and then to Bree,
it's
or
gonna
straight
be like,
to Bree.
Well, we decided to spend 2 weeks in Crick Hollow.
Yeah. Well, and I also don't know exactly where in the story Tom Bombadil fits in.
Yeah, I have no idea.
That's still... So if you, dear listener, are only familiar with the movies, get ready to have your brains friggin' splattered against the wall.
Yeah.
Not from...
I've never read anything with Tom Bombadil, but he's apparently this kind of like world-altering character in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay, so that's basically where we're at in the story. I don't want to speculate too much, just because the movie might color what I assume is happening.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts just about where we're at up to this point in the story? We've talked about just how beautiful and like descriptive and nice the journey has been so far. Yeah. It's like the literary equivalent of going on a long but quiet hike.
Yeah.
It's quite nice. It was quite pleasant to read, especially compared to
after reading the descriptions of them just traveling, like I more than ever want to do a like camping episode or something like that, like where we still working with the story, like we've read something, or we've just read a particular. It would just be us, I guess, doing our chapters for the week,
right?
But we would just be doing it from a campsite.
Hey,
and
dear listener, we'll make it happen for you. Hey, drop 5 stars and a comment down below. Smash that like button if you want us to do a camping trip.
Yeah, for real.
We'll
write it off on our taxes.
Yeah, not even
money off.
We're not even gonna record the pod. We're just gonna use your money and go on a camping trip.
Yeah, we'll actually stop the podcast once that happens.
Yeah.
No, we'll be here forever.
Yes,
we'll never die.
That's right. Some of the main things that really kind of occurred to me, because we're starting to really get into the plot and like the pace is picking up considerably. Mm-hmm. It is getting really engaging to read the book compared to the onset. Like I see why there is so much inertia for people making it very far in these books, if at all.
Yeah.
But once you get into the meat, it's a page turner. It really is.
Yeah.
Especially if you like having lots of characters and world building.
Yeah. It's like a very
enjoyable.
passive version of like playing Skyrim for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. That said, and like I don't know if you remember from when we talked about just our initial interest in Lord of the Rings from the first episode, but I read this book, I think, in 9th grade.
Yeah.
I don't remember a damn thing from this part of the book.
Yeah, I'm sure if you were reading it in 9th grade, you were also like, you were reading it when you weren't reading like Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
And like, it was like the last thing you were doing for the evening and you were just like comatose. Like, that's how I was when I tried to read anything in high school.
Because I don't know if, I'm pretty sure I had seen Fellowship.
Yeah.
Before I read it, which is why I was interested in reading it. Because I read The Hobbit when I was little, like 5th grade. Yeah. So I was familiar at least with the universe. I basically just remember like literally if you were to pick like one plot point from not even every chapter we've read so far, just half of the chapters we've read so far. That's all that I remember from this part of the book.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. But that I appreciate coming to it, and I think this is part of the reason why we wanted to do this pod, is that coming to it at this point in our lives, young though we still are, like there's so much more perspective that we have.
Yeah.
Compared to
also just like patience. Like we both have. I decided not to continue with the master's program that I was a part of, but like we both have a lot of time in like upper level education to the point where we've just read incredibly dense texts for fun.
Yeah.
So now it's like something like this, which feels sometimes like incredibly dry.
Yeah.
Is like, it's nothing because I don't have to do this for homework anymore.
And what's funny is like I find myself taking notes at least as consistent, if not more, than reading like an academic article that I've been assigned. I'm really enjoying the process so far. So I hope you all listening also enjoy this or can take something fun away from it, because regardless of whether you like Lord of the Rings or not, engaging with something at this level is so rewarding if you really are into it.
Yeah. But also, that being said, we hope that you're enjoying this, but we just tried another podcast. Oh, that's cute, Mia. Keep doing that.
I got a kitty cat making biscuits on me. Sorry, people. Hey, episode 3, we had cheddar biscuits. This week, we got kitty cat biscuits. Which is better?
Yeah. So, episode 3, we tried something different and didn't do what we initially promised this podcast would be. But, something we were obviously having the intention of doing, releasing podcasts that weren't related directly to the book that we're reading. And so let us know if you like that or other suggestions. Like, I think we all enjoyed doing the talking points at the end.
Yeah.
When we just decided that we were going to make it its own episode and not the intro to the main episode.
We're going to have fun no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Y'all just let us know what you like.
Yep.
Other than that, man, we are excited at this point in the book, and essentially nothing has happened of major consequence other than Bilbo leaving.
Right.
I am so stoked to get into the Two Towers and the Return of the King.
Yeah.
But even just like the action, like hits later on in this story.
I'm ready to see how many more animals we meet that talk.
Seriously.
Or think, I guess, more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, Drew, any final thoughts for you?
I think that's pretty much everything that I got.
All right. Well, the next episode should be, barring any changes or any episodes that aren't related to the Lord of the Rings, chapters 5 and 6. So if you want to follow along for next week, that's what we'll be covering.
Yep.
This has been episode 4 of Oliphant's Motorcycle Club. If you like the show, you should check us out on Instagram at Oliphants_MC. You can email the show with whatever's on your mind or potential episode topic ideas unrelated to Lord of the Rings at olyphantsmotorclub@gmail.com. If you want to watch Drew do some Minecraft playthroughs while the pod is playing in the background, you should check out our YouTube, Oliphant's Motorcycle Club. You can follow the show's Twitter at OliphantsMC. You can follow Drew on Twitter at DrewFelt. You can follow me on Twitter at mute_Matthew. Everything we just covered is going to be in the show notes. Thank you so much for being a listener of the show. And don't forget to drop a 5-star review if you really liked it. Alrighty, y'all. We'll see you next week with some Lord of the Rings content.